afternoon, everyone. This is Mike O'Malley here with the Hurricane Outlook and discussion for May 29th, 2020, recorded around 12:12 p.m. Eastern Time. Well, taking a look here at the latest sea surface temperature anomalies, this was updated yesterday as of May 28th. Again, you do notice our area of continued cooling out here in the Nino 3.4 region and really the Eastern Pacific Basin. This is our Nino 3.4 region roughly in through here, and again, we've continued to note the continual decline of these sea surface temperature anomalies, now running on the order of about a whole 1 degree to 1/2 degrees Celsius below the long-term average. Again, this is going to fuel the fire for what could be a fairly active Atlantic hurricane season this year. We've already had 2 named storms, and we could have another named storm either sometime within the latter part of the next couple of days from a tropical disturbance out here in the subtropical Atlantic, or maybe something brewing down here. We'll talk about both of those options here coming up. Again, if we take a look at the Atlantic Basin here, you do notice that, again, most of this area is right at where it should be or slightly above the long-term average. Again, this is only almost June. Again, we're not typically correlating these high sea surface temperatures currently for what could happen during the latter part of the hurricane season. Again, the peak of season is August, September, October. That's really the peak of season for the Atlantic Basin. And again, just because that the sea surface temperatures may not be, a whole 1 degree Celsius above the long-term average, doesn't mean that the season's going to be inactive or whatever. And we've already seen that. We've seen 2 named systems, and one didn't even come from a tropical wave, one did. And that's pretty impressive that we had one tropical wave that came all the way across, found itself out here in the Gulf, or not in the Gulf, but down here in the Caribbean, and then went off to develop, obviously, in the more favorable conditions right off the Carolina coast there. But again, it was fairly impressive that we saw this wave. We tracked it all the way coming across Africa, all the way in through here, and it stayed rather weak and didn't develop, but it did develop at least enough where we actually did get this tropical cyclone that formed right off the South Carolina coastline. So again, it's very important to understand that, just because we may not have anything develop out here in the main development region, which typically we don't start looking to that area anyway till late July into August. If systems don't form here, well, guess where they're going to form? They're going to form out in this area over here. It's going to block them from turning out to sea as quickly. So again, just because we may not have a system develop out here in the MDR, again, it's very important that you guys understand that just because a system doesn't form out there, a system could form easily over here. That's where the land masses are. That's where people live. That's where the greatest impacts are going to be from. With that being said, let's take a look at the Reynolds sea surface temperature anomaly. This is the weekly average here. Again, this is just a different way of combining, the sea surface temperatures, just a different analysis method. But again, generally right at where it should be, just slightly above the long-term average, is the general consensus. Again, this is our AMO sort of phase 2-ish 1 type deal. Again, what's interesting about this as compared to last year is that last year we had this AMO signature further up along the northwestern part of the Atlantic Basin there, and that was helping to warm some of the subtropics at the higher latitudes, which actually did suppress a lot of the MDR activity until very late in the season. But again, this year, this is further south, a lot more concentrated area down here in the main development region that should be the focal point, for a relatively decent hurricane season. Again, just because if waves don't develop out in here, they will go on to develop out in here. And again, that's where people live. That's where the greatest impacts to land and property are going to be. So very important that you guys kind of keep that in mind. Taking a real quick look at the CDAS Nino 3.4 region, again, that has been on a fairly significant decline. By the way, it's coming from tropicaltidbits.com. Again, you can see that very continued decline over the last several weeks or so, now coming up to about a month. We've really seen this begin to plummet since about April 17th. We've seen this plummeting, and it has not been able to recover. And it's actually still declining now over the last several weeks or so. And again, that's going to lead the way for a La Nina type environment to set up across this area. Again, what that's going to do is it's going to reduce the vertical wind shear across this region and promote better rising air over this region. Again, this is what's going to be the determinant now for how busy the season is going to be, is these sea surface temperatures across the main development region right there. But again, just because it might be a busy season does not mean there will be land impacts. If we look back at 2010, we had a fairly active main development region, but all of those storms actually curved on out to sea. So again, just because you may have a very busy season doesn't mean you're going to have guaranteed landfalling impacts. So again, very important to understand that preface there. Now, taking a look here at the upper ocean heat content, this was updated today, May the 29th. Again, the higher you go up in the scale towards the greens and yellows, the higher warmer water you're getting at depth. Again, generally what we've been seeing over the last several days or so, the general theme now is south of 30, west of 50, and we've even gotten some numbers generally a little bit now creeping on the edge of just to the east of 50 now as well, 50 west. So again, it's important to understand that, just because you don't see any upper ocean heat content in this area yet, doesn't mean A, there won't be, but B, what it does mean is these tropical waves that come off here, even if they don't develop here, guess what? Where the better dynamics are for the upper ocean heat content, the water temperatures, the sea surface temperatures, all of those combine over across this region with the reduced vertical wind shear. And, it could be a fairly active Caribbean this year as well, given the lack of any vertical wind shear really, or of any substantial vertical wind shear. It's been below normal. So, again, it's just kind of the food for thought that, if systems don't develop out here, they're going to form closer to the islands, closer to the United States, Cuba, the Bahamas. So these areas, especially the Bahamas that were ravaged by Dorian last year, it's going to be something again this year that if they don't develop out here and curve out to sea, guess where they're going to develop? Out in this region. So again, it's very important to understand that there's a lot at stake here, and just because maybe you might not get a fairly supportive MDR does not mean that these tropical waves are just going to die in the main development region. And we've already seen that as a result. The setup isn't favorable out here quite yet. We had this tropical wave come off and become Tropical Storm Bertha over near South Carolina. So again, it's very important to understand that there's a lot of factors that are playing into this. Again, we are just entering a more favorable pattern, again, where the sea surface temperatures are better now. And again, it's very important to understand that. And if we actually take a look at the actual sea surface temperatures, this is also from tropicaltidbits.com. Again, you're looking at the Western Atlantic Basin here. Again, west of 50, south of 30, that's where our better combination of the sea surface temperatures actually are. Again, right off the Central American coast here, where we're watching for the potential of a tropical cyclone. Water temperatures are in the 90s here. Water temperatures are approaching in the 90s down here in the Bay of Campeche and the Caribbean. So it's very important to understand we have a fairly warm Caribbean, a fairly warm Bay of Campeche, fairly warm Gulf of Mexico. This is the Gulf Stream up here, supportive. Everything has shown the signs now that this is going to be the supportive region for the next while here. And again, we have these higher upper ocean heat content numbers that are pretty high in the Caribbean and now stretching out through portions of the Lesser Antilles and so on and so forth. So very important to understand that. Now taking a look here at the wind shear from the Central University of Wisconsin-Madison website. Again, you need to notice where we have an anticyclone right now, reducing some wind shear across portions just to the east of Bermuda. We're also watching this area now coming together in the southern and the southeastern Pacific. Again, that's going to continue the favorable activity as this Madden-Julian oscillation, the convectively coupled Kelvin wave, a Central American gyre. All of these are coming together really, and what it's in layman terms, what this is going to set up for is a fairly favorable overall pattern for the southeastern Pacific, portions of the Caribbean, and portions of the southern Gulf of Mexico. So this isn't just one area that we're going to have to watch. Again, this is over a multi-specter area here that we have to watch not only the southeastern Pacific, we'll also have to watch the Caribbean and the southern Gulf of Mexico and the Bay of Campeche for what could be going on in the later run. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit. Taking a look at the 850 millibar vorticity, this is the spin in the atmosphere, about 5,000 feet off the ground. Again, the higher you go up in this scale and the higher contours towards reds and whites, you're getting the higher cyclonic spin about 5,000 feet off the ground. This is actually now designated Invest 92L for a system to the south and east of Bermuda that has a 50% chance of development over the next 5 days, which is actually this area right out here. 50% over the next 5 days as this gradually heads off towards the north-northwest here. Should stay to the east of Bermuda and only bring some marginal rain impacts to portions of Bermuda. But again, this isn't expected to be a very significant developing system. Again, this is only expected to gradually kind of organize over the next 48 hours or so. And by the time we get to Sunday, it is likely that the vertical wind shear will become too much for the system and will kind of weaken it out as such. Now, taking a look also at the southeastern Pacific, we are watching this area of disturbance out here just to the south of Central America here. And again, this has a chance for becoming a tropical cyclone over the next 5 days. The National Hurricane Center has actually lowered the 5-day probability to 70%, but up the 48-hour to 50. So 50, 70, 50% chance over the next 48 hours and 70% chance over the next 5 days. So a fairly decent likelihood that something is going to go on to develop here in the southeastern Pacific near or just over Central America. Again, this is going to be a very heavy rainfall event, regardless of development for portions of Central America, even getting all the way up to the Yucatan Peninsula and Belize City. Could see some very substantial rainfall amounts. Again, this is as a result of a Central American gyre that could be setting up. And again, just because we might get one system that develops here, this larger, broader area is going to take a lot of time. It's going to be a very slow-moving type deal. So it's going to dump a lot of rainfall over this area and also could help to develop either something here in the the southern part of the Atlantic Basin in the Caribbean or Bay of Campeche regions. If you take a look here at the 12Z model guidance for Invest 92L, again, no models are really very significant with this. Keeps it at best a subtropical depression or so. Again, this is expected to meander around over the next few days, but should stay generally off towards the east here of Bermuda. Now, taking a look here, this is the 12Z GFS forecast model valid as of today, about 7 o'clock this morning. We'll kind of move it out here again. This is our Invest 92L system out here again. It tries to consolidate. We've seen some thunderstorms near the center, but again, this should stay well to the east of Bermuda, which is right in here, and it should stay well to the east of there. There's our developing tropical system out here in the southeastern Pacific near Central America. Again, this is going to be a larger Central American gyre that's going to be across this area, which will enhance the favorability for tropical cyclone development. As you can see here, the GFS is trying to spin up one fairly potent system here near Central America, and another system here in the southeastern, or I'm not the southeastern, but the southern part of the Caribbean basin as well. So it's very important to understand that we are going to see a lot of potential development here over the next several days or so as a Central American gyre sets up. And for reference, this is the European model out to about the next 24 hours, valid as of 7 p.m. tonight. Again, here's Invest 92L out here. The European model has been the most aggressive with this system to the east of Bermuda, and continues to try to develop this. Actually, by the next 48 hours, this is a closed-off system. It could be very well a tropical depression or a subtropical depression at that time. Again, we're watching our developing Eastern Pacific system, which, according to the European model through the next 5 days, doesn't really consolidate this into an area of low pressure. But then after we get through the runs, there could be some energy that gets left over here in the Bay of Campeche. Again, this isn't necessarily the model, gospel per se. Again, the models help us pick out the larger patterns. And again, it's very important to not get caught up in just, one or two model runs. A model run might have a system hitting, let's just say a category, whatever, hitting whatever Gulf state or whatever, East Coast state or whatever. And the next model run, it may not be there. And the next model run, it's back. Again, people are reminded to not get caught up in that, as the larger pattern is going to be supportive now of tropical cyclone development over the next coming weeks. Over the next coming week to 2 weeks, there could be a favorable pattern that sets up, first of all, in the Eastern Pacific with our system here that may go on to develop. It may or may not. And then we also have to watch out either in the Caribbean or the Southern Gulf and Bay of Campeche regions for a system to develop as this larger part of the Central American gyre. Again, this is a large, broad area of turning with winds, lowering of the pressures across this region, and it takes a lot of time for something to consolidate. It takes a lot of time for something to close off, break away from the larger gyre, and actually become its own tropical system, feeding off the tropical air and everything else like that. So again, it's going to take a lot of time. This is a very difficult situation for the models to actually kind of pick up on, and we've seen that time and time again. Hurricane Michael back in 2018 was a great example of a Central American gyre setting up something. So again, very important to understand that, the potential is there for something to develop within the next 5 days in the southeastern Pacific here near Central America. Regardless of development, very heavy rainfall is expected for portions of Central America, including the Yucatan Peninsula, which includes Belize City. After that time frame, after the 5-day time frame, there is a chance either here in the southern Caribbean or the southern part at the Gulf of Mexico and Bay of Campeche for something to develop there for after. Again, it's too early to know the specifics. It's too early to get into details about where this might go or whatever. But again, the main takeaway is that a larger favorable pattern is now going to be setting up across portions of the Atlantic Basin and the Eastern Pacific Basin as we head off towards the next 5 days and eventually out to the next 1 to 2 weeks. There will be a more favorable pattern that sets up across this region. Again, and then we do have Invest 92L here that should stay off to the east of Bermuda, which with a 50% chance over the next coming days here of developing into a subtropical or tropical system. Also, to be reminded, we are watching our website here again. This is just kind of one of the many things that we're going to be doing. We are having live updates on there, live video updates. Also, the weather station's collecting great data for us, and we're going to start employing that now towards our tropical weather research that we're going to be doing. We'll talk about that more here with the Hurricane Dorian special from all the data recovered from Hurricane Dorian. We'll be talking more about that in depth with the Hurricane Dorian summary that comes out later this weekend. So hope y'all have a great rest of your afternoon and evening. I am Michael Romali, and I will talk to you guys again tomorrow.